On today's episode, we have the powerhouse that is Evelyn Webster. Now, if you're not familiar with her career, here's a quick rundown. She is the CEO of SoulCycle, so she's leading one of the most iconic fitness brands, and she took over SoulCycle in 2020 when COVID was happening. So there was a lot that was hard around running the company, and she's been on this path to really turn the company around. Before she was at SoulCycle, she was a EVP and executive vice president at Time. So she oversaw operations of 20 different brands, like InStyle and Sports Illustrated and Fortune and Essence. Evelyn, welcome to Bossy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Okay. I'm really excited because today I want to play a little game with you. I call it 21 questions for a boss.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to throw questions your way. Some will be about business, some will be just about life as a high-performing woman in the world. And I'll play along a little bit too, so we'll chat about things. And if you're listening, you can come to the comments and you can play the game as well. So we're all playing together. We may not get through all 21 questions, but that's okay. I'd rather us kind of have good, juicy conversations about what comes up.
Love it.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm going to start with a simpler one. What is a go-to outfit that really makes you feel like you own the room?
Gosh. I love very tailored dresses. Yes. And with heels, they just make me feel, as if I'm in charge.
Is there a shape, you like an A-line, you like a pencil?
No, I like fitted and pencil. I love Alexander McQueen. He does these absolutely stunning, super fitted. I don't know why. You've got to stay fit and trim for that kind of thing. But
you do.
With heels, it just makes me feel as if I'm in charge. I love it.
Okay, I love that. Okay, so question number 2, if you had to switch lives with any CEO for a week, who would it be and why?
It would be the CEO of Netflix. And why? Because I watch a lot of Netflix. It's a brand that I think is extraordinary, and the creative process of creating content, that echoes a little bit my old world, of course, when I was in media. But, being around creatives is extraordinary, and working for and with brands that you really admire, that's what gets the energy going, isn't it?
Yeah.
So probably Netflix.
Are there any things about that particular job, that particular role of running Netflix that you think would be a new challenge for you?
Oh, I'm sure there'd be so many challenges.
It's a different business in SoulCycle.
It's totally different to SoulCycle, but is it really? Because what's interesting, of course, is it's creative. What we have, they have actors and performers and creative visionaries. We have instructors who are curating this extraordinary experience at SoulCycle. So, and in my past life, I was working with journalists and creative directors. So creatively, there's a theme that runs through. I think we're all in all aspects of business. Even at SoulCycle, we do this a lot. It's about mining data and mining the data to understand what really makes your community tick. So I think there are probably more similarities than we might imagine.
There's kind of this intersection I'm hearing you interested in between the creative and data. Yeah. And that, I think oftentimes you hear your skill set is in the creative side or your skill set is in the data side. But I'm hearing you excited about the intersection of the two, which is interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. I love the intersection of the two. At the very, very, very beginning of my career, I wanted to be a creative. I wanted to be a journalist. And I didn't succeed in that endeavour, and so I flipped onto the business side of media. Did you try? I tried, and it was clear that I wasn't going to be Anna Wintour tomorrow, and I'm impatient, and so I was like, I'm just not good enough. But I love working with creatives, and so I've spent my entire career harnessing their creative power to create brilliant businesses, and that's what I do at Soul. That's what I did when I was at Sports Illustrated, InStyle, Time. And I'm
That's
sure it's
such an interesting insight. I actually feel very similarly about myself. I feel like I had so much, I grew up as a dancer, and art and performing felt very important to me, but clearly wasn't the thing that I was going to do full time. And I kind of found, I would say choreography was my first love and business was my second. And so I found and I've learned that I love business really early, right? That I found that I loved business, but there was this intersection of how I could find the in-between of the two that I think a lot of times when people think about business, they think not creative at all.
Exactly.
And so it's interesting to hear that from you.
And of course, we can combine the two things. To bring your two passions together, I mean, that's the dream job, isn't it? That's what makes what we do easy in many ways, because we love it so much.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. My first business was an art business, so like that kind of gives an intersection of I was running the business, but I was helping people find art. Okay, I have another question for you. Third question.
Okay.
When you took over as CEO of SoulCycle, kind of there was a lot of controversy that was going on around the brand. There was like a lot of talk about the culture and if it was toxic, and there was a lot of leadership turnover, and the pandemic had just happened. So when you first came, what was the first thing that you were like, all right, let's fix this first?
So I had to do two things first.
Okay.
I'm laughing because, I mean, it's, I don't know, 4.5 years ago now, and it feels like yesterday. It's like,
that was a good chuckle, by the way. That was like, I've been through battle.
Yeah.
Chuckle. That was what that was.
It was really crazy. So I did two things. So the first thing is we had to completely reimagine the SoulCycle experience. So just think about, for 14 years before the pandemic, SoulCycle's experience was defined by what we did in a darkened, candlelit room with a beautiful grapefruit scent. That was the brand experience. And all of a sudden in the pandemic, we could not operate inside. So the first thing we were doing was redefining, well, what is that brand experience? At the height of the pandemic, we had 30 outdoor studios. 30 outdoor studios. Some of them were on beautiful hotel rooftops overlooking the ocean. Others were in beautiful rooftops here in the city. We had one in Tribeca with an amazing vista of New York. Others were in the basement, in the bowels of a car parking lot. And so what we learned was, actually it was the strength of the experience that our studio teams and our instructors bring, and the strength of our community. That's the brand experience. So
what was the thing that you were fixing in that scenario?
Well, what we were fixing is we needed to we needed a business. We needed to maintain the engagement that we had with our community, and we could not physically do that inside because during the pandemic, of course, all of our studios closed. So from a business perspective, our revenue went from quite a lot to zero overnight. So the first challenge was, how can we drive as much revenue, keep the community engaged with the brand? That just means that we need to rewire our brains in terms of the SoulCycle experience and how that shows up in the world.
So like finding new formats to serve customers, essentially.
Exactly. Finding new locations where we could operate outside, so we weren't bound by the same restrictions of masks and distance and stuff. So that was kind of keeping the lights on and keeping the community active. That was a big focus.
Right. It wasn't even like, let's improve some stuff. It was like, let's survive first.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And so many brands and businesses did exactly the same thing. We all had to think crazily creatively about, what are we going to do to keep the community, the business, the brand kind of, running? And so that was the first big thing. The second big thing, it answers the question that you just asked, actually. There were lots of negative headlines about SoulCycle. There were a lot of accusations around a toxic culture. It had been quite a tumultuous time from a leadership perspective. And so I spent a significant amount of time, really within my first year, and even today, trying to understand what about the culture was broken. Was it broken? How was it broken? What were the priorities and what could we fix? And
how did you find that out?
So actually, I engaged an external firm to come in and do a culture audit. And I did that because, originally I went on a listening tour and I heard lots of things from every part of the organisation, every corner. I spoke to everybody at every level throughout, and I heard lots of things.
But if you're coming in as CEO, people are going to tell you a certain version of the story because you're their new boss, and it's kind of hard.
And sometimes it could be from their perspective, which is true to their experience, but also it doesn't necessarily represent the broader business as a whole. And so what I decided to do was to bring in a third-party company. So we brought in a legal firm who did a culture audit, and they are just agnostic. So in a way, in terms of, of course, we're paying for the services, but they know that they are coming in to undertake a job. So they're like Switzerland, if you like. And so they went through a very similar process, speaking to lots of our employees across the entire organisation, and very clear themes emerged. One of which was there was no accountability to behaviour. So we had values we were super proud of, but they were wallpaper. It was they were on the wall. They were cute, right? We maybe we put them on a wall, or maybe we put them in a drawer, but we were not living our values. And so that culture audit led to a huge piece of work that we did, re-establishing our values and mandatory training for every single employee, so that they understood the values are not wallpaper, they are living, breathing things that we aspire, values that we aspire to.
What's an example of an accountability then that you put in place? And I'm asking this question, I'm thinking about a few friends I have who just got promoted into new leadership roles at work, and they're being tasked with like taking over a brand new department,
yes.
right? And so they've got to figure out like what's not working, what's working. So like what did you do to create accountability for like the cute values?
So first of all, we provided training to people so that we translated a value into the behaviours that we expect to see and we do not expect to see. So it was very practical. How do we hold them accountable? By demonstrating every time bad behaviour is happening across our organisation that there are consequences. And I had a surprising number of conversations with individuals who, when they wrote an email that was rude to a colleague or said something in a studio that perhaps was offensive in some way, made somebody feel belittled, smaller, then the consequences was I would have a conversation with them going, that's not acceptable and this is what I'm going to do as a consequence. That could be suspending people, going through a disciplinary process. And I remember having so many conversations with colleagues across the company who either thanked me because they saw me stepping in and setting the example of actions carry consequences, here are the consequences, we take it seriously. Or I had people who were the unfortunate recipients of those consequences saying, but why are you doing this to me? And why has nobody done this to anybody else before? And obviously within my first 6 months, I was saying, we have to start somewhere, and we're starting now. There's
new culture where we've shifted it, it's here.
That's right.
So interesting,
And what's fascinating, you don't have to do that for very long before people realise, I can't just speak to somebody in that way. I can't behave in that way, or something bad will happen to me. And so it stopped. So.
Okay, I want to move to question number 4. And I want to kind of look at your broader career. So not just when your time at SoulCycle.
Yeah.
What were the 2 biggest turning points in your career?
Oh, I love
or
that
you can give me one. If you've got
well, I will say, I'm not sure if this was a turning point in my career, but it lit a fire in my belly. And I feel that has been
That's a turning point.
Okay, so very early on in my career, actually, I applied for a job which was a promotion. I was, I was an assistant publisher and I was applying for an associate publisher or something. It was like a baby step up. Yeah. And the chap that interviewed me, at the end of the interview said, I think you're being a little premature applying for this job.
Okay.
Didn't tell me why, didn't say it's because you're underqualified, you don't have the experience we're looking for, anything, just that. And it upset me in the moment. I mean, obviously, I don't mean upset me, but I went home and I really reflected on it and I thought, am I being impatient? Did I do something wrong? And what I decided was that he was putting me in a box and I didn't want to be in a box. And so it really lit a fire for me. And I thought, I'm not going to let anybody tell me that I'm not ready. If I know I'm ready, I'm ready. Ooh. And so it's interesting.
Like a chip on the shoulder moment, a little bit.
It was a real moment where it was a moment of reflection where I thought, oh, maybe I should slow down. Perhaps I should be more patient. And it's interesting how words are powerful, right? And we know that working in a creative industry, what you say has real impact. And what he said, perhaps he thought that was being helpful to me. And might slow me down, so I was less patient. And I actually think impatience is a real virtue in business. And so it just made me think, no, I'm okay. And so I learned, I'm okay. I'm just going to keep on going. You're just not the right person for me.
Yeah.
And that really led to the second turning point, which is I found the right person for me. And when I go and work for a company, I look at the people I'll be working for and the people I'll be working with, because those people are really, 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 really vital, not just to the business, but to your enjoyment of the job. So surround yourself.
When you say I found the right person for me, who are you talking about? Because it sounds almost like you're dating, right? Like I don't think I've heard some. No. There's an insight in here, because I don't know that I have heard someone say, oh, when they're talking about the company fit for them, I found the right person for me. In this scenario where you're just saying that, who was the person that you
So
found?
it was she's a woman called Sylvia Alton, who remains a mentor to me today. And when I said I found her, the job that I got turned down for, she advertised for a very similar job and I applied for it.
Yes.
She gave me some great feedback about, I'm not sure you've got all of the skills, the qualifications that we need, but she talked me through what those skill gaps were. Ultimately, she gave me the job. She gave me a go. Yeah. And she was a real believer in, look, I'll throw you in at the deep end, you'll sink or swim. And she continued to give me those extraordinary opportunities to be able to prove, one, my own worth, but also my own ability. So I found her, she found me, I found her, we found each other. We found each other, and I worked with her for quite a long time.
But the framing of I'm looking for the right person to work with as opposed to just the right company is so interesting. And also I think the other insight out of what you said is like when someone gives you some feedback, you have permission to be like, no, I'm good.
Exactly.
I love that. Yeah.
We get a lot of feedback all the time, half of which, a proportion of which you just need to let go. But you've got to think deeply about the feedback. This really matters. I take this seriously. I'm going to do something about this. But it's okay to let feedback go too.
When I think about the own turning points in my own career, I think about I had like my first big role at Google, and I had moved on. I was applying to new roles, and I applied to this job at Foursquare. My background is in tech. I applied to this job at Foursquare, and they told me similarly I didn't get the job and that maybe I would be bored in the role was the feedback. And I then was like, I realized, number one, that I do best in roles where the role is created for me, or like we co-create. I learned that. It was like the turning point where I learned that for myself, not where I just like slot into something existing, but where we shape it. And so but he said, there's this woman who she just joined the team. She's starting a brand new department. She's going to be working on our new business marketing side. Like, you might be a good fit for that. It's not ready yet, but like, we'll get back to you. And I then went on LinkedIn, found that woman, sent her a message, said, hey, I heard you're working on this. Would love to just like have lunch and see how, how I can help you, what your plan is. As she's telling me the plan at lunch, she replied and said yes. As she's telling me the plan at lunch, she's like, I actually don't even have approval for head count for my team yet. Like, I just got here. We're just figuring this team out. And I laid out, like, here's all, like, real time. Here's how I think I could be helpful to you. Here's what I think we can do. And then she says, okay, let me go back and see if I can kind of use you as proof point that we should scale out this team. And they created that role for me. And I learned that, like, number one, someone gives you that feedback. Again, like, you just say thank you and move on to kind of keep pushing. But also kind of for me, that insight that, like, I do best with a role that gets shaped around me. But I'm hearing from you that there's also an element about the person, because she was a really good fit. Brand was a really good fit for me, and we worked together really well.
I think the person is really important, because you've got to work with that. Look, we spend a lot of hours in the office or in a studio or, doing what we do. You've got to work well with the people. They have got to have the ability to get the best out of you and you out of them. And so I think the person, how they approach problems, the opportunities that they choose to give you, the willingness to create a role that meets the business need but also really plays to your strength. I mean, that isn't commonplace. Not everybody is doing that. And so I think the person is really important.
All right, question number 5. If you then, just kind of like a double click on this, because if you think about this critical turning point in your career, were there any other people around you? We know this one person, right, who said no. Were there any other people who were doubting you at the time?
Well, if they weren't telling me they were doubting me. I mean, it's interesting. I've always been really ambitious, and I say that sometimes people feel quite embarrassed about admitting that they're ambitious. I was always really ambitious. I am very ambitious. And
so everybody around you knows that this is the drill. Leave her alone. Evelyn's going.
Yeah, she's going. And sometimes, I felt as if I had to play that down in some way. I don't know. I don't know if it's a gender. I'm not sure if men would play it down, but I don't really know, to be honest. But I definitely felt on occasion that there were people around me that thought she's just really, really ambitious, stay out of her way. And but if they had other doubts or reservations about me, they didn't tell me. Fortunately, this person that I'm talking about, who I worked with quite early, Sylvia, who I worked with very early on in my career, she told me everything, that all the time, like good, bad and ugly. So
so there was some doubt in there from her too, like this was not, you didn't perform here.
This is not good, that's not good enough, I expect better. I like that. I love the direct approach. It makes it very, very clear. Interestingly, when I'm looking for new opportunities and I'm looking at partners or prospective bosses, I look for people who I think, will that person give me direct feedback, because I need and want that, because that's how we get better, right?
When I'm looking for prospective bosses, that line, as opposed to when I'm looking for the right job, that is everything to me. Okay, question number 6. If we looked in your purse right now, what would be one funny thing we would find?
Oh, my lunch. I bring my lunch to work every day.
I love that. That's a very down-to-earth thing to do, Evelyn.
Yeah, my team here at Soul always say, you're the only CEO that we know that brings her own lunch to work. And it's like, well, I like
Why do you do it?
Because I like to eat clean, and so I know what I'm putting into my own food. And
yep.
So,
okay,
yeah,
got it.
That's funny.
Question number 7, what is one popular leadership mantra or business trend that you think is actually bad advice?
Oh, bad advice. Oh, well, this is not a mantra, actually. This was just somebody gave me some advice once, and I subsequently went to them and said, that's terrible advice, don't give it to people. We were talking about what gives one joy, and in the context of your life, and he said, what gives you joy? And I said, lots of things give me joy. I gave him lots of examples.
Yeah.
And he said, well, why don't you try and do something from a career perspective that feeds your soul, that nourishes your soul? And that was brilliant advice. That's how I found SoulCycle. It was a very intentional move. I thought, Soul gives me joy. I'm coming to work for Soul. But it is bad in as much as when your job becomes the thing that gives you joy, it can create some tension. And so what I have found since I've joined SoulCycle, which is a joyful company, the job is amazing, the people are insanely fabulous and brilliant and creative, and I adore them all. But it is my job, and so it's not the place I go to get away from my job, because it is my job. And so I always say to people, be really, really careful about what you love and the extent to which you want to pursue that from a career perspective. When people apply for jobs at SoulCycle, and they're big super riders, super fans, I will say to them, be very careful, because coming to work at Soul, it will change your relationship with the company. Of course it will. Because you're going to peek behind the curtain. And so if this was your sanctuary, your escape from the chaos of your life, it will become your life, and it's no longer the escape. So I always caution people about, of course you want to do something you love, but not necessarily something that is your source of joy, because your relationship with that will change.
That's very good. I wish I understood that in my entrepreneurial journey as well, that my first company, I really loved art. I loved art collecting. It was a hobby of mine, and I built a business around it. And then it changed my relationship with that hobby. And I wish I had understood how to differentiate the difference between what makes a really good business and what makes a really good hobby. And of course, there's some overlap, but there's less requirement of trying to force the overlap than maybe you would think. And I think I wish I had thought about, well, what skill set do I have that people need and that still is fun to me and still is aligned to what I'm good at, but is not just I'm excited about it. I actually think I would apply that to entrepreneurship in a way too.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, Tara. I have a friend that also works in art, and so he sources amazing art for people who want to buy it. And I've bought art with him and I love street art, so I love Banksy, who's a British street artist. And he will talk to me about art as an investment, and I go, that's not what this is. This is a love of art. And so you will either have to be really, really, really good at setting boundaries and pulling these things apart. I'm not good at setting boundaries, which is, I work like an idiot. And so unless you're able to pull these things apart and see very clearly, but keep the love of the joy and the business separately, then it changes.
Question 8, what is one number, so revenue, customer retention, growth, that you're most proud of from your time at SoulCycle?
Acquisition.
New customer acquisition.
New customer acquisition.
And that's gone up.
It's gone up exponentially, and it is interesting. Sometimes necessity forces you to do things that you might not otherwise have thought about. And the pandemic changed a lot in our industry. It changed workout habits, fitness habits. People became much more balanced in how they were considering their wellness. And so what we found, the pandemic actually forced people to move. So we had people who moved away from our studios. They decided, I'm going to live my life in the middle of nowhere.
City, yeah.
We don't have studios in the middle of nowhere. We have them in big, busy cities. And so we realised very quickly when we reopened our studios, we need to acquire new riders. And acquisition has become the main thrust of all of our marketing endeavours actually over the last few years, and it's been extremely successful.
What's the biggest thing that worked?
Giving prospective riders the opportunity to try SoulCycle. The biggest thing about Soul, if you're on the outside, is you think, it's a spin class, and I know what to expect because I've either got a bike at home or I've been to another spin studio. SoulCycle is in actuality a stationary bike, but it is so much more than that. What we know is that you have to ride 7 times before you really locked into what this experience is. You find your people, you find your tribe, you find your community, you discover the music that you love riding to. That takes 7 rides. And so that unlimited package has been our single biggest means of driving new riders to just come and experience. They get here, they realise, oh my God, it is so much. I mean, yes, it's a really hard workout and you sweat a lot, but it's so much more than that, and that's what gets them locked in.
It's so magical when brands find that like sweet spot number. Like if you like hear the story of like Uber and they realize like, if we can get someone to, I forget their number, but to like ride 3 times, like we've got them for life. Like
That's
we really
right.
have them. So then everything can go focused on that, getting that person to that milestone.
Exactly.
Question number 9, tell me about a moment in a boardroom or an executive meeting where you knew you had to pull a power move.
I was once asked, I'm not going to name the company, it's not SoulCycle, I'm pleased to say, but I was once asked or instructed by the board to dismiss a member of my team.
Okay.
And I refused. And I decided, I said that I thought there was a place for both principles and profit, and that I would not do what they had requested me to do because it was not the right thing to do. Morally, I didn't think it was the right thing to do. So I said
One thing I love that I'm learning about you is you have a strong no.
Absolutely, yes. And it's interesting because, in business, you get swept along, like things happen, like you're setting the strategy and driving it, but then the dynamic and the momentum picks up, and you can find yourself being swept. You've always got to check yourself to your values. They shouldn't ever become wallpaper. They should always be living and breathing. And none of us are perfect, and sometimes we get it wrong. But when you see something that's wrong, call it out, and that's the no. That's my hard no.
Okay, question 12. A lot of ambitious women are told that they need to be likable in order to get ahead. So tell me about a time that you had to be unlikable to get something done.
Well, look, we want to like the people we work with, and I certainly don't want to be disliked. But there is no I don't see a separation between doing the right thing or doing the thing that needs to be done and being nice. You can deliver any news about anything. We at SoulCycle, let's be very clear, at SoulCycle, we've restructured our organisation, we re-engineered some of our footprint, we've made some really difficult decisions. I'm a big believer that you can make the right decisions for your business around structure and strategy and talent, and sometimes that might mean like laying people off or changing roles, but you can do it in a respectful way. You can explain the why behind those decisions and still get a thank you at the end of it. And so
you can do like an unlikable action but do it in a likable way is kind of what I'm hearing you say.
That was beautifully articulated, and that is exactly what I mean.
You know, the other thing that I kind of like heard in between the lines of what you just answered, you were kind of like, girl, I'm not worried about that. I'm doing my job. Like, that was the nice way. That was the likable way of saying like, girl, I'm not pressed about that. I'm running this company. Leave me alone. I'm not worried about being that likable all the time.
There are definitely moments, that's 100% right, but there are definite moments where I don't think my team are loving me right now. I don't think the company are loving me right now. And nobody likes to feel that way, right? But I know I'm doing the right thing for the company and for the long-term health and growth of the company. And
you've got that big view.
I think you've got to really in our position. If you're running a company, you've got to take the big view and the long view, and sometimes that means making difficult decisions.
Yeah. Okay, question 14. SoulCycle really has like a cult following and just built that over the years. So tell me about like a decision that you've had to make that possibly was going to risk upsetting that community.
Well, when I closed a studio that was their favourite studio, when I let go of an... So
in New York or something?
I closed, in Chicago, I closed a studio, and in Austin I closed, I mean, we closed a few studios, but in Austin we had too many, and we closed one, and everybody that went to that particular studio was deeply, deeply upset. Yeah. Sometimes we've let instructors go, that deeply upsets our riders, our community. But I've also found... I'm a big believer in transparency. Like I try and be as transparent as one is able to. You know, sometimes there's confidential information you can't share. But if you're transparent and explain the why behind something, people might not like it, but they understand it. And so I'm very active with our community. I'm in our studios all the time. They write into me. I always will respond. I'll call them. We'll have a chat. And 9 times out of 10, if you explain the why, there is a reluctant, okay, well, I don't like it, but I understand why you've done that.
Okay, question 17. What is one outdated career belief that maybe you had like 10 years ago that you had to unlearn to get to this level?
I'm a perfectionist, and so I would say this continues to be a constant practice today. Let people succeed in their own way. It doesn't have to be your way. What I have learned is my way is not the only way. And so I've had to, and still sometimes occasionally have to remind myself, my executive team are absolutely fantastic and they do their jobs their way, and that way is very, very effective. And so letting go of the control is something I had to really work on.
I need to give that one to my mother. Like, let me succeed in my own way. I like that you said succeed too and not fail, because sometimes if someone's not doing it your way, you're like, oh, they're going to fail. And you're like, no, they probably will succeed. They'll just do it in their own way.
That's
and that
right.
framing is interesting. Got it.
That's right.
So does that mean then that if you have someone on your team and they're just kind of off focus of what you think they should be doing, you just kind of let them?
No. No. I will always say, well, that's an interesting way to pursue X. Not how I would have done it. I would have thought about X, Y, Z. I have them talk me through their logic, and then we kind of bat it backwards and forwards a little bit. And candidly, much of the time, they will explain their rationale, and I'll go, okay, that makes sense that you're pushing it forward. Or through the discussion, they'll say, oh, but I might pivot it slightly.
Right.
And sometimes, of course, they'll say, you're 1,000% right, Evelyn, I'll do it your way. But they're a strong enough team. They don't have to do it my way.
Got it. But you leave them space to do it their way if that's what they land on. Makes sense. Okay. Question 18. If you weren't running companies, what would be a completely different career path that you could see yourself in, and why?
If I wasn't running company, I'd be a travel. What do they call them? I was going to say travel agent. I'd be a travel agent. I would want to do bespoke, highly curated. I'm not sure if I would want to do that though, because I'd want to do all the vacations.
I know. We also have to be careful not merging like your hobby, the thing you love, because then you just stop loving it. Maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I like giving people advice and telling them what I think they ought to be doing. So maybe I'd be a life coach or something who also organise their travel on the side. Yeah,
you'd be good. You could do like retreats for the life coaching, and then you can plan these experiences. Maybe, I don't know, I'm making this up.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Question 19, on a scale of 1 to 10, how willing are you to take big risks? So like 1 is I only make moves when I know it's certain, and 10 is like, if I have a gut feeling, I'm betting on it every time.
I take risks all the time. I think we do. I think we are never going to know everything.
Yeah.
Particularly when you're trying new things. And so I, for example, have really embraced AI at SoulCycle. I've said, how can we leverage AI as a facilitator for us to engage our community? And I don't know if I'm right or wrong. But we're putting quite a lot of effort and resource in that area right now. I often say to my team, if we don't fail, we're probably not trying hard enough, because that's how we innovate and that's how we get better and grow. So I think I've got quite a high risk tolerance.
If you had to put a number on it out of 10, what number are you giving yourself?
I'd be a 7 to 8, probably.
7 to 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's
look,
a lot of-
I love data, and I'm also a data nerd, so I will mine data till the cows come home. But data can't answer every single problem, and you don't always have the data that you might need to make an informed decision. So sometimes you've got to go with your gut.
Speaking on the AI part too, there's a lot of companies that are like doing the opposite move that you're making. Instead of leaning into it, they're like banning it from any of their teams. There's a lot of articles that it's like making people not able to think critically. Like AI is stopping employees from being like critical thinkers, and so they're just cutting it off. And so I'm hearing you say that's not the approach. You're like, no, let's lean in.
I'm leaning in. I think it's here to stay, and I think it's super exciting. I think it enables us to do more with the resources that we have. So we think of it as both a productivity tool, how can we do more with the teams that we have, but we also think about it as let's have fun, let's build features and functionality that enable us to better serve our community, that candidly without AI would take us many hundreds of thousands of dollars and many, many months to do. So I think it's fun.
Question 20, do you watch TV? If so, what is like a guilty pleasure TV show that you got no shame talking about?
So I love trash TV. Yeah, I mean, I watch TV when I'm tired and I don't want to think. So I read books a lot, but you have to think about what you're reading. And so my relationship with TV is quite, but I love rom-coms. Anything with Sandra Bullock in makes me super, super happy. Yeah. I've recently I'm watching a lot of British, crime, investigate, Slow Horses is something that I just watched very, very recently, for example.
What's the trashiest that you've got on there?
I just watched Apple Cider Vinegar, which, by the way, wasn't trashy, but it was completely insane and crazy. I don't know if you've seen it.
It was insane.
So
I just watched that. Yes, about the woman. She had sort of like, she
brain
pretended to have cancer, or what it pretended is I don't even know if that's the right word.
It was so odd. But the trashiest trash. Look, I watch Miss Congeniality 1 and 2 on repeat, and I watch Legally Blonde 1 and 2 on repeat.
Legally Blonde is so good.
She's just fabulous. She's just And I will watch them over and over and over and over again. I don't know why, but they're just brainless. So
okay, last question. What is the next big move that you want to make as the CEO of SoulCycle?
I want to open studios overseas. I want to go into territories that have not had the joy of experiencing a SoulCycle class, and I want to move us into new markets.
What kinds of regions are you thinking about?
Middle East, Australasia, I think is really interesting territories.
Cool. Love it.
Yeah.
Evelyn, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. This is lovely getting to know you both as a CEO and also just as a boss lady.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, Tara. Thank you.